Good afternoon. This is the Torah on this week's Parsha, which is Parashat Terumah, and it basically deals with Hashem's instructions to Moshe on how to build a Mishkan. The Mishkan is a sanctuary. It's to provide a residence for Hashem in this world, as composed to Shemayim. There's a midrash phrase, why would Hashem need a dwelling place here? He created everything. And there's a midrash that explains there was this king whose beloved daughter, was getting married and moving to another country. He said, all I'm asking, my dear daughter, is that you provide me with a small place in your husband's new castle, palace, so that when I want to visit you, I have a place to stay. And what is the nimshal of that? What is that connected to this parsha and the Mishkan? Is that Hashem is named dwelling places in heaven, but he loves the Jewish people and he wants to have a place near us. Now, there's some very interesting questions raised, because one of the things that's built here is the Keruvim. They have the Aron Kodesh, which is made of gold, where the Torah and the tablets of Yisrael, so the Libros are kept. And on top of it, the cover of it, is these two Keruvim, sort of angels, and between there, Hashem appeared, and a voice emanated from there. Now, there's a question, just beyond the scope of the Torah, is that the normal dimensions don't apply in a Mishkan, and God, so to speak, contracted himself, but the space there, even though it's a finite space looking on the outside, is really infinite. Now, and then goes on to Hashem instructs Moshe what materials are needed. The people were asked to provide the materials. It then goes on to discuss what the Aron Kodesh looks like, the Shulchan, Nora, and among other things, the actual construction of the Mishkan itself, the whole tent that was going to be set up, and what it was, and then the altar, and the entire enclosure, the walls that surrounded it, and that is the extent of the parsha. Now, what I'd like to address is the following. At this time of year, Parshas Terumah always comes out, virtually always, in the month of a Hebrew month of Adar. And the month of Adar is in the time when we're supposed to be marveling simcha, multiplying happiness, increased happiness. The festival of Purim comes, which is described in great deal in Megillus Esther, where Haman plots to destroy us with Achashverosh, and Hashem, through hidden miracles, saves us. And Mordecai becomes the new prime minister, and eventually the child that Esther had with Achashverosh becomes the new emperor of Persia. And then he allows the continuation of the Darius. He allows the reconstruction of the second base of Mikdash. Now, so the question is, what does the Parsha have in common? Building the Mishkan doesn't seem to have anything in common with Purim. And more so, I'd like to bring one other thing. The Mishkan is a microcosmic representation of the universe. Everything, it's based on the 10 sayings, it's connected to 10 sayings in which Hashem created the universe, and that are also known as the various divine qualities in the higher worlds. And different things in the Mishkan represent different aspects of those higher spheres, of those higher qualities, Parsufim. And what does that have to do with Maaseh Bereshit? Because what was Maaseh Bereshit, the creation of the universe? That was God putting his presence in our world. And technically, what we were supposed to do, the whole earth was Hashem's dwelling place. And our job, even today, many centuries later, is to find him, to seek Hashem's presence everywhere, both in what we call nature and science, as well as the more what we call liturgical, religious aspects of it. And again, what does this have to do also with Purim? And let's look first at the Mishkan. The Mishkan was a kapora, and making up for the sin of the Egel Zahav, the golden calf. Because when some of the Jews worshiped the golden calf, it's as if they were denying the existence of Hashem, or at least not that he had never, they wouldn't accept him as the unique God. And the things in the Mishkan, the various items, going to make up for that. In fact, one of the things, a number of the kalim vessels and other things that are described represent a counteraction to the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, the poison of the snake, when the snake got Adam and Chava to eat from that fruit, which led us to being exiled from Gan Eden and changed the whole history of the universe. Because otherwise we would have never left Gan Eden if they hadn't eaten from that fruit. Now, and to show the tie-in to Purim, I would like to read Megillah Esther, beginning of Megillah Esther, one verse. And the first verse says, Yehi b'yemei Achashverosh, hu Achashverosh melech du ad kush sheva esrim mea medina. And that it says in the days of Achashverosh, then it repeats, hu Achashverosh, who's Achashverosh? He's the melech mehodu al kush. And from these naming the places, basically today it would be most of the Middle East, plus it extended into what's now India. It's a huge empire, and it had 127 provinces. Now, nothing in the Tanakh, the Chumash, the Megillot, the Raya, the prophets, nothing is extra. Every word, every pasuk, every vowel is essential. So why does it mention Achashverosh twice? Why did it say who Achashverosh? I could have just written it. Achashverosh, Amelech, and describes it, and then describes him as king. Why do we need this? Who's Achashverosh? He just goes on to describe who Achashverosh is. So there's something much deeper going on here. One of the explanations of this is from the Vilna Gaon, Rav Eliyahu Vilna, who was one of the greatest rabbis of his generation, and for that matter, in the last many hundreds of years. And he explains to really get this story, you have to go back to the beginning of the creation of the universe. Now, in the beginning of the creation of the universe, famous verse where it says, second verse, V'haaretz ha'isa tohu v'bohu, choshek al pnei tehom, and ruach elokim mechavetz al pnei mayim. This earth was without form and empty, with darkness on the face of the depths. But God's Spirit moved onto the water surface. And then it goes into saying all the things he does, V'hior, let there be light, and many others. Now the question is, by the way, one of the explanations of when it says Tohu v'bohu cheshek al panei tehom, then it talks about Hashem's hovering. It's got the whole history of the 6,000 years of the creation. Um, Tohu was the Babylonian exile. Uh, Bohu was the Persian exile, the one where the story of Megillah Esther takes place. Choshek, darkness, is Greece. That's for another time why Greece is compared to darkness. And finally, Tehom, Alpine Tehom, is talking about the current exile. Asa Medum Rome, which now becomes the Western nations. This is all impacted, and this is all included. Now, what the Vilna Gaon focuses on is the word Tehom, which in Hebrew is spelled Taf, Hey, Vav, Mem, so feet. Now, if you rearrange those letters, what are you going to get? You'll get the first letter of the following four words: Hamalak Hamavat, Hamavas, the angel of death. Now, who is the angel of death? This takes a bit of an explanation. It's the Yetzer Hara, the impurity. What we say, who manifested first as the snake that tricked Chava into eating the food. Tree of the knowledge of good and evil, Eitzadas Tov and Ra. She gets Adam to eat it, and then all the animals to eat it, because if she brought death into the world, she wants to have company. So she spreads it to everybody and every creature. Now, the Yetzer Hara has three forms. It appears as a snake. That's the Yetzer Hara. That's the evil force that's trying to deceive us into doing evil things. Now, in this second hat he wears is the angel of death. Now, why? After he gets a man or woman to commit as many sins as possible, he goes to God and said, this person is hopeless. He or she's never going to do tshuva. We got to send him up. We have to send him to the next world. And then as Satan, his third hat, he is the accuser who points out all the averas and says, look, in the heavenly court, this person has got to be punished for everything they've done. Now, according to the Vilna Gaon, that is the explanation of who Achashverosh is. On a deeper level, he represents the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination. And if you look at the whole story of Purim, I'm only going to go through one brief part, is the famous party that happened 9 years before the actual events of the story, the rest of the Megillah Esther, was his calculations. The Jews are supposed to return to Eretz Israel after 70 years of exile. According to his calculation, which is incorrect, he figured the time it expired. So what did he do? He took out the vessels of Beis Hamikdash, used them for his famous 6-month drinking party. He also took out the Kohen Gadol's clothes, the high priest's clothes, and he wore them. He should have been struck down on the spot for all of that, but Hashem saved him for the later miracles of the Purim story, which, if you look, all of them, Hashem's name is not mentioned explicitly. And if you look at everything that happens is behind the scenes. But once you see the whole picture of the Megillah Esther, you can see it can only be done by divine intervention. Now, if Achashverosh is the Yetzer Hara, then what's the cure? And they explain Esther's other name, Hadassah, that she represents the tree of life, the Eitz Chaim. And only by doing Torah and mitzvahs can we have a refuah. And that, on a deeper level, is what the whole story of Megillah Esther means. Now, so we see that Ma'aser Bereishit's involved here, because not only did we have the not only were all the good things created in the universe created, Hashem also allowed the Yetzer Hara to exist, and it was mankind's and womankind's fault that we didn't do what he said. And so that has been in the history of the world since then. Now, the Yetzer Hara was almost totally destroyed at the time of Har Sinai. In fact, if we hadn't succumbed to the Egel Zahav, there wouldn't have been a need for a free choice. There would have been need of the Yetzer Hara. So we see that both in the story of Megillas Esther and the construction of the Mishkan, we both see there's a challenge, which was the Egel Zahav, and there's a refuah, a cure. We're doing it, and therefore, if we in fact keep all the Torah mitzvahs, we can elevate ourselves. Now, I would like to go into one more element. All these events of Purim take place, most of them in the month of Adar. Now, as we know in the story of Megillas Esther, there's a 3-day fast. Hashem turns the table on Haman, and the people are saved. And there's a renewal of faith in the Torah and mitzvahs. Now, I'd like to apply, this is like everything that we experience. It's not just that 1 year back in Persia when Haman was hung. All of these events have a spiritual impact every year. And I'd like to fast forward now to the modern history. Now, back in the year 1990, Iraq, which was originally Babylonia, had a very evil ruler, military ruler named Saddam Hussein, and he decided he wanted to grab the oil of the state of Kuwait because he claimed that was an extra province of Iraq. The nations of the world got together, made a huge armada and force, and starting in January of 1991, they started attacking Iraq from the air. But let's look at the other incident. When did the actual invasion of Kuwait take place? It was on Tisha B'Av of the previous year. That is the saddest day of the year when the Yetzer Hara seems to be in control of the evil inclinations. It's the lowest day on the Jewish calendar. Though again, when Mashiach comes, it's going to be a positive day. But right now, it's the saddest day of the year. And when did the triumph over Saddam Hussein happen? The ground invasion began on Parashat Zachor, which is the Parshas before Purim, where we remember the mitzvah to stamp out Amalek, who Haman represents. And when did the ground war finish? Miraculously in 5 days. It finished on Shushan Purim, that's where we celebrate in Jerusalem. In other world cities. It all happened in 5 days. Now, looking at the whole long-range planning that Hashem did from the beginning of creation up to story of Megillas Esther to now, looking at the events that happened 25 years ago, and looking now at the events, the second empire that's supposed to fall before Mashiach comes is that of Persia, which is now Iran. And this month, which is a month of both hidden and hidden miracles, whole story of Megillas Esther, we can see more miracles. We've had miracles throughout the war since October 7th and 23, and that these miracles, just like Hashem has set up everything with the creation of the universe, the Mishkan, to compensate for what we did and how we had a renewal of a relationship with Hashem during the story of Purim, Megillah Esther. May we continue to see these open miracles and learn the lessons that Hashem is effectively running everything and doing Torah mitzvahs and just seeing all the miracles, the open miracles that have occurred since October 7th. May we merit that this Purim we see the triumph over the modern day rulers of Persia and the Ayatollahs. Good Shabbos and Shabbat Shalom.